Salvete, discípuli, soy el Tutorísimo, tu profesor favorito, y en este último vídeo para sección vamos a ver Unit 8, the first Habsburgs and the conquest of America. Using these notes and using the presentation I am about to switch to, both available for downloading in your virtual classroom. Let's go. Boom. So, in this unit we are going to talk about the first Habsburgs, the one who ruled Spain or the Spanish monarchy in the 16th century, Carlos I and Felipe II, and lastly of the exploration and the conquest of the Americas. Before that, between the Catholic monarchs and the rise to the throne of Carlos V, there was this problem with Juana la Loca and Felipe el Hermoso. After Isabel died in 1504, both Juana and Felipe became the kings of Castilla, but Felipe el Hermoso died shortly after in 1506, so Juana was the legitimate queen, but she was declared loca, she was declared mad, or with a mental illness and unfit to rule. So she was imprisoned in a monastery in Tordesillas, and as you can see here, first by his father, the regent Fernando de Aragon, and later by his son Carlos V. They are buried in the Cripta Real de Granada, both Felipe and Juana, with the Catholic monarchs Isabel and Fernando. So after the death of Fernando in 1516, Carlos I rose to the throne of Castilla and Aragon in the year of 1516. This is Carlos at this time, very young, with he's 16 years old in this painting. And what territories did he get? He got a lot of territories from his four grandparents, Fernando, Isabel, the Catholic monarchs, and also the parents of his father, so his paternal grandparents, Maximilian and Mary of Burgundy. So, from Isabel, he got all Castilla, Navarra, and America, which is not shown here. From Fernando Aragon, he got Aragon, Sardinia, Sicily, and Naples. From his paternal grandfather, which is Maximilian of Austria, he got the Archduchy of Austria and the right to be named emperor, which he achieved in the year 1519. Finally, from his grandmother, Mary of Burgundy, he got the Duchy of Burgundy, including the Franche-Comté, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. So, once again, from Isabel, from Fernando, from Maximilian, and from Mary of Burgundy. Here you can see all the territories Carlos V ruled over in his coat of arms. So at the beginning of his reign, he came to Spain. He arrived in Asturias, in 1517, and he faced some internal problems. First of all, he appointed a lot of Flemish councillors in the best positions of the kingdom of Castilla, being the most famous one Adrian of Utrecht, who was named regent after he departed to Germany to be appointed as emperor in 1519, and this led to some revolts within or inside the territory of Castilla. The most important one is La Revuelta de las Comunidades de Castilla, or the Revolt of the Comuneros. It started in 1520 and ended in 1522. All of these cities with these purple dots, all the lower nobility and the bourgeoisie, they revolted against the government. They tried to appoint Juana, which was imprisoned here in Tordesillas, as the queen of Castilla, because they were not happy with the rule of Carlos, and also because Carlos asked for a lot of money and he didn't know he didn't speak Spanish, and many other issues. They were defeated by an imperial army in the famous Battle of Villalar, 23rd of April 1521, which is located in Valladolid, and after that the leaders of the comuneros were executed. They were Padilla, Bravo and Maldonado. Juan Bravo, Juan Padilla y Francisco Maldonado. This day is celebrated, it's every day in the village of Villalar, known nowadays as Villalar of the Comuneros. The other main revolt is what in your notes says revolt of the Brotherhoods, but we can say revolt of the Germanías. Los agermanados, agermanats, they were people of the crown of Aragon who had the right to carry weapons with them to defend themselves from the attacks from the raids of the Barbary pirates, the ones we have talked about a lot in this video and the previous one. So they took advantage of this right to carry weapons, and they revolted against the abuses of the nobility. The king had to send his army too, and they were defeated first in Gandia and later in 1523 the last rebel city, which was Palma de Mallorca. Then the foreign policy. Carlos V had several wars against many enemies. The first one being the French, our natural enemy. We were fighting the French, especially their king Francis I, over their Italian pretensions. We defeated them in a very important battle, which is the Battle of Pavia. It's a village located next to Milan in northern Italy. And after that, after this battle, the King Francis I was taken prisoner and moved to Madrid, and he was kept prisoner, supposed or allegedly, in La Torre de los Lujanes, which is in La Plaza de la Villa in Madrid. This is the sword of Francis I, and after that the French recognized the possession of Milan, the Duchy of Milan, by the Spanish. So Carlos V annexed the Duchy of Milan to his possessions. Here is Carlos V when he's 33 years old, and the next objective is going to be the Ottomans, the Turks, and mainly the Barbary pirates. If you remember, Barbary is refers to the northern coast, the coast of northern Africa. This map is upside down. Here is the south, and here in the bottom is the north, and at the top is the south. So this is the coast of Africa, and this is the Iberian Peninsula. The main conquest, or the main achievement of Carlos V was the conquest of Tunisia in 1535, which is depicted in these pictures, actually. Okay, but the main problem that Carlos V had to face is the war against the Protestants in Germany. Carlos V, was the emperor who had to face the Protestant Reformation of 1517 by Martin Luther. You remember the last exam here in Wittenberg, where Martin Luther started this Reformation. In green, you can see the German states who supported this Reformation, and all of them made an alliance among them, which is called the Smalcaldic League, La Liga de Smalcalda in Spanish, and they fought Carlos V. Carlos V defeated them militarily in the Great Battle of Mühlberg in 1547, which is the one in which he's shown riding his horse in this famous painting of Titian, of the Tiziano. But even though he defeated them militarily, he couldn't convince them to come back to Catholicism, so he finally had to sign the peace. This peace is known as the Peace of Augsburg, which is a German city, in the year of 1555. By this peace, he gave the German princes freedom to choose their own religion, so they were allowed to be Protestant if they wanted to. This was very sad for Carlos V. He was very depressed because of this. he resigned and he abdicated in his son and his brother the next year of 50-56, and he retired to a monastery in Cáceres, el Monasterio de Yuste. Here you have several pictures of Carlos V. This is el Palacio de Carlos V en Yuste, Patrimonio Nacional, very beautiful place with his chair and his bed. And his corpse, he is buried in el Monasterio del Escorial de San Lorenzo del Escorial, which built his son. Here you have the summary. Remember, you can download this presentation or you can pause the video right now if you want to read it. After that, the next king is Felipe II. He came to the throne in 1556 until his death in 1598. Well, this is Felipe II in his youth, and the first point is a global empire. It is called a global empire, el imperio donde nunca se ponía el sol, pero, but because of several reasons. First, did he inherit all the territories from his father? No, he didn't. Carlos V split or divided his territories between his brother, Fernando de Austria, and his son, Felipe II. Fernando de Austria was given the territory of the Archduchy of Austria and the right to be named or appointed Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, whilst Felipe II was given the rest of the territories, the Spanish territories, both Castilla and Aragon, the Italian territories, including Milan, and the Burgundy territories, the French Comté, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. But it is called a global empire because Felipe II also managed to be named or to be appointed King of Portugal. He claimed the throne of Portugal because of the death without any heirs of the kings Sebastián and Henry of Portugal. Sebastián y Enrique de Portugal, mostly after the death with no sons of Sebastián de Portugal in the Battle of Alcácer Quibir in 1578. After that, and a short military expedition led by the Duke of Alba, Felipe II was named King of Portugal, and here you have the coat of arms of Felipe II as King of Portugal, with the coat of arms of Portugal incorporated to his personal ones. And also their territories, so both the orange and green territories you can see in this map, they were all part of the Spanish monarchy, and that is why it is called a global empire. Then Felipe II had to face some domestic problems as well as his father did, and there were two main ones. First, las alteraciones de Aragón of 1591, or el caso Antonio Pérez, which is this guy over here. He was a secretary of the king, and he was accused of an assassination of the secretary of Don Juan de Austria, which was Pedro de Escobedo, with the help of la Princesa de Éboli. And he managed to flee from prison, and he seek for refuge in Aragon because he was from there. Felipe II had to follow the fueros, the Aragonese laws, so the Aragonese could only be judged by an Aragonese tribunal. In this case, a court. In this case, el Justicia Mayor de Aragón. So Antonio Pérez went after or under the protection of el Justicia Mayor de Aragón, Juan de Lanuza. But Felipe II sent or accused Antonio Pérez with the Inquisition, which the Aragonese couldn't deny its jurisdiction. Yet it upset a lot the people of Zaragoza, and Antonio Pérez was freed by the people and he managed to flee to England. But in exchange, Juan de Lanuza, the Justicia Mayor, was executed, which is he's remembered right now in Zaragoza, and finally the revolt was defeated with the entrance of the army of Felipe II in the city of Zaragoza in 1591. The other main problem was the War of the Alpujarras. Alpujarras is a mountain range next to Granada, and this is known also as the Revolt of the Moriscos, starting in 1568 until 1571. The Moriscos, if you remember from the previous unit, were Muslims who were forced to convert to Christianity, to Catholicism. They were officially Christians, but they kept a lot of the traditions and costumes that they had as Muslims, as you can see here, for example, in the clothing. After this, they revolted this year. They even elected their own king, Aben Umayya, but they were defeated by the half-brother of Felipe II, a bastard son of Carlos V, Don Juan de Austria. In the foreign policy, this is the most important part of Felipe II because he participated in a lot of wars. First, he finished the war against the French. Remember, we were fighting over Italy, but in this time we even invaded the French territory from the Netherlands, and the great victory of Felipe II was the Battle of Saint-Quentin, la Batalla de San Quintín, in 1557. This was the reason why Felipe II built el Monasterio del Escorial. And after this battle, the war was finally won, and the peace was signed a couple of years later in Cateau-Cambrésis in the year of 1559. So the French refused to all their pretensions in the Spanish territory, and they recognized the possession of the Duchy of Milan. So here in this map in yellow you can see the Spanish possessions in Italy. Also here. Later, the main conflict that Felipe II had to face was the fight against the Protestants in the Low Countries. If you remember, the Low Countries, the northern part of the Low Countries, the area of Holland, the main religion became the Calvinists. And these Calvinists sought for more political autonomy and mostly for religious freedom, which Felipe II was not eager to concede. So they started a rebellion in the year of 1568, which lasted a long time, specifically 80 years, and that is why it's called the 80 Years' War, starting in 1568, ending during the reign of Felipe IV in the 17th century in 1648. And there were several battles and a lot of campaigns, being the most important ones during the reign of Felipe II, the ones led by el Duque de Alba, Fernando Álvarez de Toledo y Pimentel, against the main leader of the rebels, William of Orange, Guillermo de Orange. The Duke of Alba, or el Duque de Alba, was a very bloody character, and he made a lot of assassinations in the Netherlands. That is why he receives a lot of hate right now in the Netherlands. And as there's a reference in the national anthem, the Dutch national anthem, to the King of Spain, and this is how the war evolved. Here, 1568, this is the Spanish Netherlands, but just 4 years later, here in a dark orange, here is the territory that the rebels control. There were a lot of battles, Haarlemmermeer this is a naval battle, and after the Duke of Alba, we sent several commanders, being the most famous Don Juan de Austria or Alejandro Farnesio, who was also a bit bloody. He was the responsible of the sack of Antwerp and Amberes in 1576, known as La Furia Española. As you can see, you can infer why is that. Then there was the rebels continue advancing very slowly, and we got also some victories, but ultimately they will achieve victory. The sack of Maastricht by the Spanish, El Milagro de Elche, this is a victory also by the Spanish, El Milagro de Empel, I already explained it, and if you want again the explanation, you can check it out on the internet. And finally, the last rulers during Felipe II were Alberto de Austria and Isabel Clara Eugenia, which is his daughter, and the successor of William of Orange is Maurice of Nassau. We will talk about the end of this war when we reach Felipe IV. Lastly, the war against the Ottoman Empire. The Turkish were still a problem, and the piracy, the support of the Turkish to the barbaric pirates. So, but not only for the Spanish, but also for the Mediterranean powers, Mediterranean Christian powers, Venice and the Papal States. So because of these rulers, one of the greatest rulers that the Turks had, Suleiman the Magnificent and Selim II. So all these Mediterranean Christian powers, naval powers, joined together in an alliance called the Holy League, La Liga Santa. Spain, the Papal States, and the Republic of Venice. They set up a navy and they went after the Turkish navy, and they battled here in Lepanto, which is a city in today's Greece, and this was a great victory for the Christian navy, and that is why there are a lot of pictures. This battle took place in the year 1571, and it is famous also because it was the one Miguel de Cervantes participated in. Lastly, the last war that we had to face is against the English, particularly against the Queen Elizabeth of England. He was the youngest daughter of Henry VIII. She was Anglican and she was very anti-Catholic. So she entered a war against the Spanish, mostly supporting piracy. Francis Drake is one of the most famous English pirates, and also supporting the Dutch rebels in the Netherlands. This is the expedition of Francis Drake. So Felipe II decided it was time to invade England, and he set up a big army. He gathered a lot of vessels, and his plan was to sail to the Netherlands and embark 20,000 troops and then land them in London. But this navy, which is called the Grande Felicissima Armada, or the Great Armada, or the Spanish Armada, or La Armada Invencible, was defeated, was a failure because of the storms and because of the victory of the English. So many of their ships were sunk and only a few could come back. But the English also sent us another armada, which is the English Armada, the year after, and they were also defeated mostly in the defense of La Coruña by Maria Pita. And a little bit about the Spanish military, because the Spanish military dominated the fields in all the 16th century and the first half of the 17th century, and they were called the tercios. They were like this, they were their weapons, this halberd and this sword and this helmet, and also they used pikes and arquebuses and muskets. They usually form in these squared formations, as you can see here, using these long pikes of 6 to 8 meters long. You can see them here easier. And how did these troops reach the main campaign theater, which was in Flanders, was in the Netherlands, using what is known as El Camino Español? Since this route was blocked, the naval route was blocked, we had to use El Camino Español, which started in the Italian possessions of Spain and went north until the Netherlands, until reaching the Netherlands. And here you have some photograph with the arquebuses on these long pikes and the swords and the shields, and these again pikes with this square formation. This is part of the Milagro de Empel, and this is Rocroi, the last battle of the tercios. Well, one of our greatest defeats. You can see them in real motion in this fragment of the movie A la Triste of 2006. Felipe II died in 1598 and he's buried in El Monasterio del Escorial. Here you have the summary, and the last part of this unit is the exploration and conquest of the Americas. No for the Americas, of the Americas. First, the explorations. So, the main exploration is the travel around the world. The most famous exploration is this travel, or this sail around the world, performed by the Magallanes Elcano expedition between 1519 to 1522, starting here in San Luca de Barrameda and going through South America through the Strait of Magellan and all the Pacific, and stopping in the Philippines. Here Fernando de Magallanes was killed, so Juan Sebastián Elcano, his second in charge, had to finish the voyage in 1522 in the now Victoria. After that, there were other explorations, being the most important ones the route from Mexico to the Philippines, discovered by Miguel López de Legazpi, and the route back, El Tornaviaje, discovered by Andrés de Urdaneta. These two guys over here, and the ones who first settled in the Philippines. Also, Francisco de Orellana, who sailed through who explored the Amazon River. Here you can see his route. And also Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, who explored the north, the peninsula of Florida, and what today is the south of the United States. We are the ones who discovered for the first time, or who see the first time, El Cañón del Colorado, or the Grand Canyon as it is known in English. But also there were other great explorers, not only the Spanish one, John Cabot, which is an Italian working for the English, and he discovered the route through Newfoundland, and Pedro Álvarez de Cabral, who discovered Brazil. This is the route of John Cabot, and this is the route of Pedro in red, the route of Pedro Álvarez de Cabral. So after this we have to talk about the conquest. Well, at first, after the first explorations of Christopher Columbus, the Spanish settled in the Antilles, in Hispaniola and in Cuba. But soon after that we had some news about a great empire, a great civilization in the area of today's Mexico. Here we have two big civilizations, the Mayas, which lived here in the Yucatan Peninsula, and you for sure know about these archaeological sites, Chichen Itza, Tikal, and the human sacrifices they performed. This is a fragment from the movie Apocalypto, if you want to watch it at your discretion. Then, in inland Mexico, there were the Aztecs, which was one of the many Mexica people, and they were the ruling one from their capital here, Tenochtitlan, which is built on top of a lake, and with these very big temples and also their human sacrifices, but they lived with agriculture and trade, of course. So when Hernán Cortés heard about this, he set up an expedition from La Española, from Cuba, and he went after the conquest of this Aztec empire in 1519. He followed this route until he reached the Aztec territory, and he founded the city of Veracruz. He received the emissaries of Moctezuma. He made an exhibition, so Moctezuma invited them to the capital. Many Spaniards didn't want to go, so Cortés sank their vessel so they couldn't come back. On the way to Tenochtitlan, he set up an alliance with the Tlaxcaltecs, which is one of these Mexica peoples, which were angry with the Aztecs, and the first fights with the Indians happened, for example, the La Matanza de Cholula. So Cortés eventually arrived to Tenochtitlan, and he interviewed with Moctezuma, which is the name of the Aztec king or Aztec emperor. He was kept prisoner in his own palace. But Cortés set up this expedition without the permission of the governor of Hispaniola, Diego Velázquez. So Diego Velázquez sent another expedition to imprison Cortés. Cortés went to the coast, to Veracruz, to face this expedition. He defeated them, and most of their soldiers joined Cortés himself. And then he came back to Tenochtitlan. But while he was away, the La Matanza al Templo Mayor happened. In a religious ceremony of the Aztecs, the remaining Spanish in Tenochtitlan thought this was some kind of an ambush, so they decided to attack first, and they killed a lot of Aztecs. This made them very angry, as you can see here. So when Cortés came back to Tenochtitlan, they had to flee the city, and this is called La Noche Triste. They had to flee to Allied territory, which is the Tlaxcaltec territory, and then this was now an open war. They set up a new army and they defeated the Aztec army in the Battle of Otumba of 1520. After that, they sieged the capital Tenochtitlan until its fall in 1521. This is the last emperor, Cuauhtémoc, which is tortured. After that, between 1531 and 1533, we have the conquest of the Inca Empire. This is the Inca Empire by 1525, which occupied most of the west of South America. The main archaeological site nowadays is Machu Picchu, and they were an Indian civilization with a lot of gold and who praised the sun. Well, and that is one of their main constructions, these amazing walls. The conqueror of the Inca Empire was Francisco Pizarro, also from Extremadura. First, he was living in Panama and he heard also, just as Cortés, a lot of news about this great civilization that was located in this area. After several trips, he found the Incas, but well, he carried Spanish war dogs, but in the meantime, this is a cool episode, Los 13 de la Fama. Many people were tired after 4 years of exploration, so at one time only 13 of the men of Pizarro wanted to come after them, so they crossed this line, and they are known as Los 13 de la Fama. Well, eventually Pizarro arrived to the Inca territory, which is the city of Tumbes, and after that he negotiated the conquest with Carlos V. When this conquest was, when he was given permission, he took advantage of the political situation and instability that the Inca Empire was suffering, because there have been a civil war, and recently ended civil war between two brothers, Atahualpa and Huáscar. Huáscar was now a prisoner of Atahualpa. So Pizarro met Atahualpa in the city of Cajamarca, and in Cajamarca he was required to subdue to Carlos V, but since he didn't understand anything, he offended part of the Spanish, so they attacked. And during this attack in Cajamarca in 1532, Atahualpa was made a prisoner. And to being rescued, the Spanish asked for gold, and Atahualpa said in this cuarto del rescate he could fill this cuarto del rescate to this level with gold and silver, which the Spanish agreed. So the emissaries started to bring gold and silver to Cajamarca, and in the meantime he was asked to bring Huáscar, but he was killed by orders of the Peaky Blinders. No, by orders of Atahualpa. So when they were done with this gold and silver transportation, since Atahualpa was not useful for the Spanish, and because of another reasons, he was finally or eventually executed in the year of 1533. The same year, the Inca capital Cusco was conquered, and Pizarro didn't like its location, so he founded a new capital, which is Lima, which is today's capital of Peru, in 1535. And the last Inca was Tupac Amaru, which was some Incas who remained independent in the mountains, and he was executed in 1572. After this, there were more expeditions. Pedro de Valdivia, who is the conqueror of Chile and the founder of Santiago. And also there is very important el Cerro Rico de Potosí, which is the main silver mine of South America, located in today's Bolivia. And finally Juan de Garay, which is the conqueror of Reino de la Plata and the founder of Buenos Aires. So finally we end with the colonization. So how were these newly acquired territories administered? Well, with the help of several institutions. The first one, El Consejo de Indias, established in 1524, and as well as the other consejos or the other councils we have talked about in the previous unit, Consejo de Castilla, Aragon, Portugal, because in 1580 Portugal was incorporated, Italy, Flanders, etc. there was this Consejo de Indias was created with this law expert who advised the king in matters related to the territory. And the jurisdiction of this Consejo de Indias was all these territories you can see here in red color. Then we have the trade, and to control the trade, which is all these red and green lines, the trade was a monopoly of the state, and to control it, every aspect of the trade had to go through la Casa de la Contratación. Today the only remain is the Archivo General de Indias, and la Casa de la Contratación is located in Sevilla. Finally, the territory was divided into parts, two new viceroyalties, one in the north, here in green, and one in the south, here in orange or pink, no sé qué color es este. With the border in Panama. In the north, the viceroyalty of Nueva España with its capital in Mexico. In the south, the viceroyalty of Peru, with its capital in Lima. And finally, for the economic exploitation, there were two main systems. The first one, mostly used for agricultural purposes and in the northern part of America, was the encomienda. The encomienda is a territory, a piece of the territory who was given to an encomendero, a Spanish colonist, and also a group of Indian workers adscribed to the land. These Indian workers worked for the encomendero, and in exchange for this work they were given shelter, they were given a salary, and they were instructed in the Christian faith, as you can see here. Finally, the other system is la mita. This is a system of forced labor which was used by the Incas, and a system that the Spanish continued. This was forced labor that was performed by the Indians for a period of time every year, and which was not paid, and it was mainly used in the mines, as you can see in this picture also. And this led to a lot of abuses from the Spanish, but this was tried to be corrected by Fray Bartolomé de las Casas, but that is part of another unit. Here you have the summary, and we reached the end. This is a Thomplantry, which is a wall of skulls using the skulls of the human sacrifices of the Aztecs. Pues con esto hemos terminado. Espero que os haya quedado claro, más o menos meridianamente claro, a pesar de que llevamos 38 minutazos de vídeo. Y bueno, ya sabéis, para cualquier duda me podéis escribir, y con esto hemos terminado los vídeos por la parte de sección, porque los últimos temas los hacemos por trabajo. Muchas gracias por verlo y pues adiós. Espero que os hayan servido los vídeos durante todo este curso. Saluditos.